Hiya, I'm Bruce Fummey. It's the 21st of February. I'm in Kings Park in Western Australia, and welcome to today's episode of This Day in Scottish History. And I'm sorry to say this again, but there's been a murder. This time, a regicide. You see, because on this day in 1437, James I was murdered in Perth. Now, if you're watching in Australia, no, I'm talking about the real Perth. If you're watching in England, then he'd be silly. See, because English people think that James I didn't exist until 1603. Not just because they're 200 years behind us, but because when it comes to Jameses, our English cousins get a bit confused with ones and sixes. So let me explain. Imagine the Australian cricket team are batting. That's a six. Imagine the English cricket team are batting. I think you get the idea. Now, if you're sitting next to an Englishman who's just gone daft and saying, what about if the Scottish cricket team were batting, then don't listen to him. Clearly he's on drugs. Anyway, the complexities of the story that I want to tell you just now are so great that to understand it, you need a slide rule, a genealogy chart, and a box set of Game of Thrones. Now, if you're watching this on an iPhone, there's probably an app for that, but they will charge you for an extra cable. So I might as well try and condense the story as much as I can and save you a bit of cash. Early in the 15th century, Robert III was the second of a long line of Stuart kings on the Scottish throne. Unfortunately, he'd been kicked by a horse and gone doolally. But he had 6 brothers, 2 of whom we're going to talk about today. One of them, the first one, was Robert, Duke of Albany, and he was proper dodgy. Yeah, he's going to be the baddie in the first act of this pantomime. The second one we're going to talk about, Walter, Earl of Atholl, he'll be the baddie later. Okay, so Robert, Duke of Albany, is the baddie that's looking after the kingdom for Robert the Third of Scotland. In truth, he's looking after it for himself as he builds a stronghold in Doune Castle. Anyway, baddie uncle, Duke of Albany, manages to get hold of David, which is Robert, his brother's eldest son, and he locks him up and starves him to death. I know. Anyway, Robert III might be doolally, but he's no stupid, and he thinks to himself, I better get James, my second son, away to safety before anything else happens. So he puts him on a boat to send him to France. But that boat gets captured by English pirates. Now, if you're still following the pantomime theme, this is the time to do the hissy-booey type thing. These pirates hand James over to Henry IV of England, and he demands a ransom. It takes 2 weeks before the news gets to Robert III, the doolally Scottish king back home, and when he hears the news, he drops dead of shock. So James becomes James I of England, James I of Scotland in captivity in England. Ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Henry IV must have felt like he'd rolled a double six, got a hotel in Mayfair, and won £10 in a beauty contest all in one go. There was no way he was going to let James out of jail free. The problem was that James's baddie uncle, the Duke of Albany, was now in control in Scotland, and he was in no hurry to pay a ransom. And so James spent 18 years as a hostage in England. He pretty much grew up there. And Stockholm Syndrome must have kicked in at some point, because just after the Battle of Agincourt, we find James fighting for England, Harry and St George against the French in the 100 Years' War. Now, bearing in mind, Scotland was allied to France at this time. So imagine you're a Scottish foot soldier, you've gone fighting with the French against the English as part of your treaty obligations, you get captured, and who's there but your king? And the English hang you for treason for fighting against your king. You'd be raging. But that happened. Now eventually James got back to Scotland and he exacted retribution on his uncle, the Duke of Albany, by chopping off the heads of him and some of his family. But then he got pally with his other uncle, remember, baddie number 2, Walter, Earl of Atholl. Well, they got pally at first, and then James started to try and encroach on lands and inheritance that Walter would have passed on to his sons. And greed on both sides led to consequences. And so, on this day in 1437, James was in Perth, which was part of his uncle, his baddie uncle's territory, and he was staying in the Blackfriars monastery. He'd been playing a bit of tennis. And baddie uncle number 2 remembers how baddie uncle 1 starved James's older brother to death, and he obviously thought, why don't I take control by killing this one? What could possibly go wrong? And so, one evening, a bunch of baddie uncle number 2's henchmen burst into the king's chambers, and one of the queen's ladies in waiting, she stuck her arm through the handles so as to stop the door opening, but as they burst the door open, they broke her arm. James decided to flee by going through the sewers, but it was only when he got into the sewers that he remembered he'd had a grid put over the sewers to stop the tennis balls getting lost. And he got captured and murdered in a sewer in Perth. What a shitty way to go. If you know where Robert, Duke of Albany, starved his nephew David, then stick it in the comments below. As always, if you've enjoyed this, like and share the clip, like and share the Facebook page, Scotland History Tours, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Scottish History Tours. There will probably be a link down below. I'll see you next time. Ta-ta for now.